Good afternoon, my friends. It's Josh here. I've just got my last sip of coffee. I'm finishing off. A little bit cold, but that's okay. I don't mind cold. A little bitter though, Anyway, so now I've told you about my coffee. And now I'd like to discuss something else with you all. Something that's very important. Extremely, extremely important. And I don't remember what it was. See, that's the thing. I just had this idea for a video that I was going to make really quick, and it just totally popped out of my mind. And I thought, well, it'll just come to me while I ramble for a second at the beginning, and it didn't. So now I'm stuck with the conundrum. What do I do? Do I continue on? Do I start over? Well, I'm going to tell you something. I think it was about the preachers. Now that I think about it, yeah. But here we are. I'm going to continue on. Now, that intro will be forever burned into this video. Benny Hinn, Joel Osteen, Kenneth Copeland. Do you know these names? Maybe that's why I forgot what I was going to talk about. Because it was God trying to stop me from being mean to these poor preachers who were making millions and millions of dollars off of an unsuspecting audience by wanting them to plant a seed of prosperity, and the gospel will bring them plenty. And it's all bullshit, and it's all an act. The big question is the act real? And do they know how full of shit they are? Do they even care? Now, I've had a thing against televangelists since I was a kid. And I grew up with Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, who were like some of the 80s televangelists. And you'd see them on the TV doing their telethons. Back then it was a telethon. So people would call in and donate and, give your money to the Lord, right? And look, I have also a major issue with tithe and to what churches have done in the past with their money. But I see nothing wrong with giving money to a church to help keep it afloat, to make sure there's a place for people to come together, because I'm not anti-church. I'm definitely anti-churches being exorbitant with their money. Things like the Mormon temple does, for example. I get wanting to have all marble halls. There's one, half hour from here where I used to live, this giant marble, totally marble, like exterior with a big gold something on the top, and it's a beautiful structure, don't get me wrong. But yeah, it's amazing what people will spend out of the money that their people, it's like tax money, if you will, for the church. But I have an issue with that, only because I've met people. I was working for a guy who was broke, and he was telling me, yeah, he's a Mormon and he has to pay this money and he can't afford it. And all growing up, I remember thinking about how these guys acted, like how sure of themselves they showed, pretended to be on stage. And then I came across the faith healers, and these are the guys who, just put their hand on somebody's head and then they are healed. We all know that it doesn't really heal people. A lot of the time people have temporary relief. They've been known to get up out of wheelchairs, but within like a day or two, they're back in it because it was the excitement of the moment. Like you're pumped with adrenaline, you're wheeled up to the stage, and it depends on the condition. They're not going to take somebody who's totally paralyzed. So if you're not aware of how this works, when all the audience comes in, they have these watchers, basically guys who go around and mingle with the audience beforehand in the lobby, and they get people's info and figure out where they're sitting. Well, they kind of pry, like, why are you here? Like, oh, My son isn't doing well. Oh, okay. We're sorry to hear. I'm sorry to hear that. All right. And they pretend like they're there for something. Next thing you know, they're being called up. I'm sensing somebody's missing their son over here. And yeah, they all have earpieces, and the whole thing's just a sham. It's BS. It's like the Sylvia Brown. I remember my mom, R.I.P. Mom. She used to love Sylvia Brown. I think later in her life she realized she was a hoaxer, but so much of her shit turned out not to be true, and I think it all culminated in the case where she said somebody's son or daughter was already dead and murdered, and then they ended up finding them and they were alive, and she was pretty discredited after that. If you tell a family their kid's dead, but these psychics are, they're preying on people's wallets the same way. And I think her hotline was what, $100 a minute or some shit. I mean, these people charge like hundreds of dollars per reading. Basically, it's like this: if somebody's doing like a half an hour like psychic reading with you and they're charging you $1,000, they're obviously a scammer. It's not that their service is better. It's that if they really had those talents and they were putting them to the right use, then they would charge you a fair amount, because to help and heal others, you have to have healed yourself. And when you're scamming and ripping people off, it just shows you haven't reached a level where you understand fairness, if you will. And fairness is a huge part of all different types of doctrines, equality, kindness, virtues that a lot of people just don't follow, even if they are part of a religion, if you will. But the thing is, most religious people follow certain moral principles. And if you're truly a Christian and you really claim to preach, what Jesus said, speaking on Jesus's behalf or God's behalf, to me has always been a very slippery slope when it comes to preachers, and they were only necessary in the days when the church didn't allow people to read their own Bible. And there was a time where it was punishable by death in some places to have a copy of the Bible. It could only be read by a preacher. Now, this is because they wanted to instill those components they agreed with. And later in I think the 13th century, the Council of Nicaea arranged the Bible into the final, form it is today, removing the Apocrypha, right? Isn't that what they call it? The Apocrypha, I think, were the texts that weren't allowed into the Bible at the time. But there are a lot of metaphors and symbols within Bible. The Bible isn't just garbage. Like, I was convinced, I was agnostic/atheist when I was younger, and I always said, the Bible is just a bunch of stories. I don't understand any of this. But I did read Revelation when I was like 16, and I was like, okay, there's something to this. It's just got to be decoded and understood. And even at the time, I was reading theories that it was about, I remember something about, oh no, that was Nostradamus. They were talking about the red dragon will rise or something. And I was like, reading a transcription, somebody was saying, well, they said in the next 20 years or 25 years, China will rise up and surpass the U.S., as like the dominant force in the world. And it's funny because that was like just 25 years ago, and here we are, and I'm not going to say they're, surpassed us, but they're definitely up there, if you will. China's come a long way. It's a pretty wild story. But I've never been there, so what do I know? I just hear the stories like everyone else, and I'm only privy to the information I am. However, anyhow, back to the story. These guys, these smooth talkers like Joel Osteen, right? So it just looks like a douchebag to me. I can't help it. But this other guy, oh God, Kenneth Copeland, he's the guy who got confronted by Inside Edition. And they kind of confronted him getting onto his plane. He has like 2 like multi-million dollar planes, right? And he was getting onto one, and she interviewed him, and he was like, being all, well, he looked creepy as hell. Like, if anybody were to give me a lineup of like 20 different people being interviewed and say which one is a demon, I would say this guy looks like a demon. I mean, I don't know how anyone could watch that and still believe that guy is like normal, but he confronted the newscaster. First, he was complimenting her and being like, "Oh, my wife loves your show," but then she's like, "Well, do you really need these planes?" And he's like, I fly all over and preach the Lord." This whole bullshit excuse. And the thing is, some would say, well, God promised it to him, right? That's what he deserves. But that's not what Jesus preached. He didn't preach, exorbitant wealth. It was about helping the less fortunate. And guys like that have so much money that if they're really that hardcore of a Christian, they would be giving that money away, knowing that they could live on just a fraction of what they have. I mean, the idea that a guy like that has that much power over people is scary. It's like Jonestown shit, right? I mean, people will believe anyone. People will do some pretty crazy shit if somebody else tells them that it's true. And I've realized over the years that it's very easy to fall for others and what they're telling you. Sometimes it's pretty benign. You're not going to get hurt or anything. But other times, no, you could possibly, get seriously harmed, or physically or mentally, by just even something as simple as following people's bad advice. I mean, we've got to be very cautious about which voices we allow into our minds. And these preachers, like, they just reek of fraud to me. Like, you can just hear it in their voice that, money, money, money. So when I was about 18 years old, I got in the mail one of these. This was back in like 94 or something, right? Maybe 96, whatever. I was somewhere in my late teens. And I got this letter from some church. I can't remember what church it was, but they had an envelope in there, and it was like, what was it? Plant a seed, right? This is the prosperity gospel. What these, shady preachers teach, which is nonsense. The prosperity gospel is bullshit. But they say basically, you give money to God, and then God will give back to you in other ways, right? So just, some people might get money down the road, some people might not, right? You never know. But it's giving money to him, basically, to whichever preacher it is, and then saying God will return it to you. And to me, that's just, it's preying on people's beliefs, preying on people's hope, thinking that they'll be in favor with God by doing these things. And it's sad. It's kind of like caveat emptor, buyer beware, But no matter what situation that applies to, I still say, it's not always just the buyer. Sometimes it's the merchant that isn't telling you the truth about the product, right? It takes honesty on both sides to say buyer beware. And that's where it becomes a problem. Yet people continue to believe these guys. Like, all of these preachers, these televangelists who have been proven to be lying to people, it's ignored. And what I've realized with whether it's Hollywood or politics or people in sports, if somebody has a hero that's famous, they're unlikely to change their opinion on anything. It's like, no, this guy's innocent. He'd never do anything wrong. It is what it is. And I think with preachers, it's even more severe because they believe this guy's in line with God. If I fuck this up, it's forever. You know what I mean? And they take advantage of that, and they know that. And let me just say, if you ever get the chance to go to a mega church during one of these huge rallies, you're going to get excited. You're going to feel the Holy Spirit, because I do every time I go to a concert. It's amazing. It's a totally different feeling. It's a natural high that you can only get from those experiences with the other group of people with the same intention. So it's easy for people to believe, well, this must be the one truth. And maybe he does want me to give my money away. And look, if you can do it, give your money away. That's great. Just don't give it to these billionaires, because, there's so many other ways that we could do things to help other people. And it's especially bad for the old folks that are most easily preyed upon by these guys. And they're the ones that are targeted. So, anyway, I got off track. When I was 18, they sent me one of those envelopes with the plant a seed thing. And I was like, kind of irritated. I was like, dude, they're ripping old people off doing this, This is pre-internet days, so I couldn't look up the church or anything. So I filled it out, and I think I sent them back like a dime or something like that. And then I believe they sent me back like a quarter, and this went on for a few rounds. Whatever, I don't recall how many times we did this, but I guess that was their thing. They said, we'll send you back. I can't remember how it worked, but whatever they sent me back, I kept it, and I just ignored them from then on out. And I thought, okay, now I'm ahead of the game. It was just kind of my little joke, to them. And I still find it pretty funny. But I'm pretty sure it was $1. But you know how memory is? It fails you. It's just how it is. Can't remember shit, You think you remember something a certain way, and it seems so true in your mind, and then the person who was with you is like, dude, it wasn't like that at all, or I was the one who did that or said that, oh, okay. Yeah, well, getting old, it is what it is. I'm almost 50 now, but even when I was like 15, I could see through these bullshit preachers. Like, I could see when people were lying to me, and I just can't understand why other people allow these people to take advantage of them. And as I said, over the last decade or so, I guess, I've started to acknowledge that people don't want the truth. They want to be told a good lie, a really good lie. And God, now that I say that, it sounds like somebody would have already said that, and they probably did. I think I might have even heard something similar. But yeah, people aren't interested in the truth because it's extremely complicated and nuanced. People want black and white answers to most things. This is why people just say all conservatives or all liberals are this way or that way, or all Christians are idiots, or all atheists are going to hell, or whatever it might be, just labeling entire groups of people without getting to understand how closely connected we really are and how similar we are. And I want people to have hope. I want people to be able to connect on that level. But when people are sitting at home, especially old folk, behind their television screens, which was huge when I was growing up. I mean, that's where most of them saw these preachers, and they would just send them money, and then they'd say their name on air, and they'd take phone calls and give you prayers over the phone. And they're all full of shit. Like, they're not chosen by God. You don't need a middleman to God. You can connect with God. You can connect with Spirit without these old white-haired dudes who are just taking your cash. I think a lot of folks have wisened up to these things, but snake oil has always been popular. I mean, there's always somebody out there selling you hope. And hope is usually, to me, it's one of the most difficult things to navigate in business, because I have ethics. I would never sell somebody something that I thought or would claim would help them medically in some way or beneficially health-wise, and totally bullshit them. I can't imagine doing something like that. That to me is as good as, assault or murder. Like, I mean, if somebody dies because you didn't inform them that a product was bad, that's pretty fucked up if you knew that there was the potential there. So I guess honesty and integrity are the first and foremost. And we don't see that in these preachers. You don't see that in a lot of people. I see more integrity in a lot of atheists than I do in these so-called Christians. So that's, take that, put that in your hat. Is that a saying? I got nothing against Christians. Make that clear, okay? I have a very high tolerance for all religions at this point, with the exception of Scientology. But I have nothing against Scientologists. I even appreciate Mormons. I've talked to a lot of them at the door because I appreciate what they do for the family. However, Scientology is the opposite. It makes you excommunicate your family, basically, and cut off ties with them. And, traps you, and then they come and humiliate you and stand outside your house and scream things all day if you leave the church. And it's a very hostile church environment. I wouldn't want to work there. I wouldn't want to live there or go to Tom Cruise's house and do free labor for like $1 a week or whatever. It's just weird shit happens. Or be David Miscavige's wife, who mysteriously disappeared years ago, who's they think's being held captive. She's probably like a breeding. Who knows? Who knows what they're doing up there? But the Scientology, if you want to know what it's all about, South Park nailed it. They did a great episode years ago, a couple decades ago probably. But yeah, pointing out just, that they believe that the alien Xenu came from this planet and sent souls into a volcano, and they burst out and got into bodies, and here we are, and we're fighting off these demons they call thetans. But the whole thing is sci-fi. A lot of folks, I don't understand. There's another perfect example of, you can see the guy's full of shit, but people just don't care. L. Ron Hubbard wrote more science fiction than anybody else in history. Anyone. L. Ron Hubbard holds the record for writing the most science fiction of anyone in history. And he was actually quoted as saying, well, God, if you really want to not have to pay taxes anymore, start a religion. The guy knew what he was doing. And when he started Scientology, originally, his intention, I believe, was just tax dodging to be able to make money. Of course. He didn't really believe that shit. He was never said that he was like told these things. There was no proof that, any of this. He wrote it and made it up as he went along. And then it was kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod thing with him and the people around him. And then they actually got people who started believing it. And here we are today. It's a wild belief system, but I can't even call it a religion because it's so, it has no real values, okay? It's not, here's the problem I have with all religions, most religions, is that any aspect of them that dismisses the general public as being either evil or going to hell, like with a lot of mainstream religions, but also seeing the public as like a nuisance, like in a lot of Buddhist sects and temples where they hide out for their whole lives and don't interact with the public. There's a certain responsibility that we must have and must balance in our lives. So anyway, that's my ramble for the day. I talked about money, and I talked about people and Kenneth Copeland, and man, that guy really looks like a demon. But really, because I was thinking about wealth and how rich people get away with doing shit that poor people would never get away with. I mean, it happens all the time. The people are always getting arrested for shit, and people stand up for them, like I said. And it's just a weird thing that we all seem to need a hero, somebody to look up to. And there's always somebody willing to take that role, right? Jim Jones, right? David Koresh. And sometimes they have good intentions. Sometimes the story isn't what we're told. What's a fascinating story is the Charles Manson story. I'd urge you to look into that. More info comes out on these things, and you're like, holy shit. He was part of MK Ultra, the mind control experiment by the CIA. And I think that so was like a couple of the shooters that have tried assassinations in the past. And a lot of, let's just say, controversial people were involved with these, acid tests and different substances. Or MK Ultra was an amazing program, amazing in a horrible way. Like, the things that they put people through. That's nothing. There's the Tuskegee like experiment, the syphilis experiment, where they infected a bunch of black people with syphilis, like over a long period of time. They finally admitted a lot of these things over the years, but they've also tested on their own soldiers in war zones, testing new chemicals, defoliants, Agent Orange, right? I mean, they knew that was poisonous. There's just so much kept from people, and people are just treated like cattle. It's just fucked up. It really is. So here's this guy, and he's worked his whole life, just told to just be a good American, fight for your country, comes home, he works hard at the mill, he retires, has a small amount of retirement, but he's starting to get low, and he's afraid he's not going to make it. Then he turns on one of these douchebag fucking Kenneth Copeland guys. He's like telling him if he plants a seed, he'll get more money back, and the guy has like early stage dementia or Alzheimer's, and somehow he ends up, and these days it's easier because you just go on your computer, type in your credit card number, and all of a sudden you've drained your bank account in hopes that you're going to get something bigger back because they've convinced you that you should, because they're like predators like that. They'll, if you give them a lot, they'll message you back and be like, oh, thank you so much. Got any more? And, people with good intentions get screwed over by people with bad intentions. That's pretty obvious. But it's up to all of us, I think, to stand up for the people who screw others over. I mean, this is just people who do fraud. I'm talking about, it's not just them, it's the thieves. That's even worse. It's an even bigger part, because at least with those thieves, people have some hope with, the preachers and whatnot, and maybe they can manifest some truth in their life and abundance. But when it comes to thieves, they're just taking your shit and taking your money without, you getting anything out of it. And that's a much bigger issue that I wanted to cover in another video, but I really don't want to make a whole video talking about thieves. I've had my cars stolen from my driveway twice, and from my son from his place twice, broken into several times. I started leaving my other car unlocked, just like go look inside, there's nothing there. It seems like it hasn't been quite so bad, like as far as my street getting hit, in quite a while. But then recently there's been a lot of shady people out there smoking Fenny out on the road, and we've just got to watch our neighborhood. It's a street with dead end on both ends. Not dead end, but it ends on the side streets, so it's not a thoroughfare. It's not like a lot of people come through, so we keep an eye on each other. But yeah, it's kind of creepy, when you get your stuff stolen and you're like, wow, I've been totally violated. If you've ever had your car stolen, it's the weirdest feeling to come out in the morning and be like, wait, did I come home drunk or something? Crash my car? Where is my car? Yeah. It's a horrible feeling. And then you have to call the cops, and they come over and tell you they don't give a shit, basically. That's, because there's nothing they can do. They put it in a report and wait for it to be dumped. I'm selling the Honda Passport that got stolen, actually, right now. I met some people who were going to buy it, so I'm going to do that eventually here. It just has bad vibes after they stole it. Not only did these fuckers steal it, then they cut out the catalytic converter, took the battery, and left it in a parking lot. Probably because they couldn't get the gas or the hood open or the gas tank, because the knobs were fucked up. And then they stabbed the steering wheel, the airbag, like 24 times with some kind of knife. Nice, huh? Why? Just to be an asshole and damage it as much as possible. It was a guy and a girl, so shame on both of them. Because I have them on video camera, but I didn't even bother showing the cops because they don't care. They're not going to do anything. They can't do anything. They don't have the power. They never fucking want to. And that's why I said, like, it's up to neighbors. It's up to us to protect each other, not just from criminals, but from, to protect your grandparents from going to these Kenneth Copeland-like characters and believing these assholes, or forbid turning on Fox News or CNN, right? Friends don't let friends watch the media. Let's just dip out of that shit. I've made it in no politics year, and it's very hard to do, but yeah, it's healthier on my brain. So, but I have been paying attention to the wars, which is why I got sucked into the thing about pagers and radios exploding, and I just couldn't get away from it. So, now that one's been on my mind, but that's a different topic altogether. That was my rant for the day. Thank you for listening. It feels good to get a bunch of rambling shit out about these guys. These preachers have just pissed me off for years. I have a couple other videos over the last decade about them, like, because I talked about charlatans and thieves for so long that I just feel like there's nothing new to say. People who take from other people knowingly, without having anything to actually return, or making false promises, it's all theft, and it's all wrong. So shame on all you thieves. And that also includes making a deal or having, working with a suit and tie. You're working in a business where you're having, clients sign contracts, buying houses or cars, whatever it might be. The used car salesman. Yeah, the person's happy with their car. But did you make more than you should? Or did you charge them more than you should have? Like, being fair is part of business, as far as I'm concerned. Being honest. Competitive, yes. Making a profit, yes. But what is fair? And that's usually based in equivalence to, what the average person in that commodities market may make, right? So you can say, well, as a CEO, I should make $10 million a year instead of 100,000. It's like, well, that's quite a raise, my friend. But that's pretty much what they've all done anyway. Anyway, I'm out. I'll talk to you next time. Peace.